Kyle, we love you, brother. When are we going to collab? Dude, he's doing shows about me like every week. Just reach out, man. I'll be nice.
Either way, Zach, I thought a fun and kind of, interesting, weird story that I'm a little bit, not sure how to feel about. I'm interested in your opinion on this one. We were talking about Nick Fuentes, obviously, on our last stream. We published a clip where we, we're discussing his beef with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and how he's really rising in celebrity. His star is certainly on the rise in conservative media, which is frankly terrifying and a huge indictment of the conservative media space and what we're up against here. But I thought this was pretty interesting because obviously, friend of the show, Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, he's been putting out a lot of videos covering Fuentes as Fuentes has started to turn on Donald Trump and, call out MAGA as the embarrassment that it is. Obviously, Nick Fuentes is a total embarrassment in his own right, but it's an interesting sort of tone that he's striking here, being very critical of the Republican establishment and Trump specifically. And again, Kyle's been making a lot of videos about Nick. It seems like Nick has responded.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's go ahead and take a look at this because I think that there's a lot to unpack here, right? Obviously, there are a lot of red flags that, are raised when you start thinking about, okay, Nick Fuentes is a rising star in conservative media. And you do have to be careful. How do you, go about poaching his audience? How do you go about de-radicalizing the people who have been swept up in his racist Nazi fervor? How many people who have bought the propaganda that he's been spewing? How many people are like, oh, now maybe it is the global cabal of Jews. Maybe it is the fact that, white people are the master race and everything, all this crazy stuff. How do you, deprogram those people? Because a lot of people are going to have the response, okay, those people are just gone for good. Fuck them. I hate them. Those people are fucking Nazis. You can't argue with Nazis. I don't want to look at Nazis. Well, unfortunately, when you find yourself in a society where that is an overwhelming amount of the population, right, particularly the young men, somebody is going to have to go out there and be the garbage man. Somebody is going to have to go out there. Gavin and I have often compared ourselves to two dudes in overalls at the end of a long parade on the internet, shoveling up all of the shit. Somebody is going to have to do the work of going out there and saying, hey, this is why this guy's popular. Here's what people are attracted to about him. Here's how we can deprogram these people who are being swept up in what is an easy solution, an obvious con solution. But it's hot to trot right now, right? And I think Kyle's trying to thread that needle right now. I think we're trying to thread that needle. And I think a lot of people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are going to continue to amplify this guy's message because he's really popular.
Yeah, much like Dr. Jacoby, we'll dig our way out of the shit or shovel our way
out of the shit.
Let's take a listen to this. Pretty weird to hear come out of Nick Fuentes' mouth.
Stein can't stop and sent $10. Another reluctant and sweaty glaze from Kulinski. Niggas is hungry.
Oh, dude. Brother's doing tricks on it. No, we like Kyle. Kyle Kulinski loves my show. Kyle, we love you, brother. When are we going to collab? Dude, he's doing shows about me like every week. Just reach out, man. I'll be nice. Kyle Kulinski's like a fan of the show now. No, he's always like saying, oh, I agree with Nick Fuentes, but he's still a Nazi dipshit. Dude, come on. It doesn't have to be like this, man. We can be friends.
Labcraft sent $10.
We don't have to.
And that's the thing you have to be careful with when you're dealing with Nazi content creators like this, because Kyle obviously does not fucking like Nick Fuentes. He doesn't love his show. He doesn't want to be friends with Nick Fuentes. If you were to sit down, I wouldn't dare to speak for Kyle on a lot, but I'm willing to go ahead and speak for him on this. If you were to sit down with Kyle and be like, do you have any respect at all for Nick Fuentes? He would say, not for any of his political ideology, right? He would say, that guy's a fucking moron. He's a racist. He's like a fucking, Jew-hating, fucking anti-Semitic loser, right? He hates black people. He thinks that white people are the master race. Wouldn't say anything nice about him. But because Kyle has been covering him, because he's been doing a lot of content about him, Nick Fuentes is trying to spin it to his audience as a W for Nick. Like, come on, bro. Like, I know you're afraid of the woke liberal media. I know you're afraid of your progressive audience, but we're one and the same, bro. We're both disaffected white guys. Look at our skin color, bro. Don't you see your skin color? Have you ever heard of skin color, bro? We have the same skin color. Like, that's the bit that he's trying to do right now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think in a sense he's kind of just joking in the same way that you could imagine like Cenk or Anna being like, oh yeah, the Vanguard, they're our biggest fans. They can't go a single episode without talking about us. I think it's kind of just a joke in that sense, where Nick Fuentes is like, yeah, Kyle, you've been putting out a lot of videos about me. It seems like you're, keeping pretty close tabs on what I'm saying. You must love my show.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the nature of the joke. But I definitely see what you're saying. And what I'm more interested in, and what I'm interested in your opinion on, Zach, is how Kyle should respond to something like this, because there's a few options he has. One of them is to just keep making content about Nick Fuentes and not respond to him, directly, not respond to this, attempt at a, conversation. But the other path would be to invite him on Crystal Kyle and Friends. That would certainly be a controversial move, and it'd be one that they'd have to take very seriously and, really respect the opportunity they have there. I don't know if opportunity is the right word, but I guess occasion.
The obligation that you would have.
The obligation, because you'd have to walk a very fine line. I don't think it's a good idea to just go into a conversation with Nick Fuentes and start like moralizing or like woke scolding him and be like you're really racist. Like there's a correct way to do this, because you don't want his audience just clowning you for sounding woke or whatever, but you also have to go in there and actually destroy him at the end of the day. You can't go in there and just, be buddy and do a friendly softball interview where you talk about how Donald Trump is cringe and embarrassing now. Like, no, you'd actually have to confront him on the reality of his deeply dangerous and fascist ideology.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. You cannot do anything that would launder his reputation. If you go into a quote unquote conversation, it has to be a confrontational debate. You have to be going into lock horns. You have to be willing to engage in a real battle with this guy. And the way you do it is really important, because you don't want his audience to be able to dismiss you as just a cringe liberal. Oh, you want to sound woke, right? But the reality is his ideas are bullshit. His ideas are crap, right? It's an easy fucking solution for a guy that's a pipsqueak white dude to be like, what, white people are actually the master race. It's like, come on, dude. It's the most self-serving bullshit line of logic I've ever heard in my entire life. Could you not brainstorm a little harder than this? You would have to come in and you would have to just make him look like an idiot. You'd have to make him look like a guy who's completely uninterested in facts, a guy who has no knowledge of history, a guy who's so short-sighted and selfish and lonely and pathetic and disenfranchised and has no worldly knowledge and is just so limited and small that you couldn't possibly take anything that he has to say seriously. That's how you pummel this guy. Right now, he has such an inflated ego, right? This guy's on a fucking insane ego trip. He's got an airhead. It's the size of a fucking small state. Okay, this guy is crazy in how much he believes in himself. He's sucking his own cock for a living every single fucking day, right? You have to humiliate this guy. You have to debase him. You have to go out there and make him look like the emperor without any fucking clothes on to his audience so they can see what a fucking fraud he is. That's the only way to do it, in my view.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a matter of how you actually do that, because it's really hard to, make someone with no shame feel ashamed or, embarrass them when they don't even have the capacity to be embarrassed in the first place. I mean, think about what this guy does for a living and think about the tune he's been singing for the past, 5 or 10 years. So it's pretty hard to imagine even Kyle or Crystal going in there and just like debating him with facts and logic. I don't really know if that's an effective method as far as countering Nick Fuentes. I kind of feel like the best path is just to ignore him, don't actually engage with him. I don't know. I just worry that I just feel like it's hard to debate someone who's that bad faith and who's that much of a genuine fascist, because what it's going to come down to is like, what are you going to start debating whether or not the Holocaust happened? We were talking about this the other day. It's like, there's a lot of things I'm willing to debate, but no, I don't really want to sit here and get into the weeds and start responding to like a bunch of weird, like Holocaust denial arguments with some total fucking neo-Nazi who's so far up his ass and so deep into some mythology that I have no awareness of. I'm not familiar with all of these crazy Nazi talking points. I don't really feel prepared or equipped to respond to them. I feel like you'd almost have to study that shit professionally. Like you'd have to be an expert in fascism or anti-Semitism to really take each of these claims and, destroy them in a proper way. So I feel like personally, I would have no interest in doing something like this because I know where it would go. And I don't want to debate shit like that. But I don't know. I just I feel like it's a trap almost.
Yeah, I mean, it could very easily be a trap, right? And that's one very valid response, is to be like, fuck this guy, right? Like, I don't have to actually engage with him one-on-one. I can continue to debunk his lies to a wider audience from my own show. I don't have to allow him to respond in real time. However, I do think it would be worth it, because I don't think we've seen anybody do it yet, right? And maybe we'll watch somebody do it and his audience will
Debate him?
Yeah, but or debate him in such a way that they are an expert, right? Like, think about the guy that's the voice of Bob's Burgers, that's friends with Sam Cedar, that dude H. John Benjamin. I'm not saying he would ever do it, right? But one thing I do know about that guy that Sam Cedar told us is that he was actually a college student that studied the fucking history of the Holocaust. Like, that guy would know all of the fucking ins and outs. There has to be dudes like that who are deeply, deeply familiar with the ins and outs of that fucking history. It's less than 100 years old. There's people who've studied it their whole lives since it happened.
It's the most well-documented war crime in history. There's definitely proof of it happening. I'm just not a historical expert, you know?
Oh, 100%. And I think that that's a really fair thing to say, but I think it would be worth it to say, all right, Nick, you're so loud and proud of your ideas. Like, sit down and argue with somebody who's a legitimate
Norm
historian.
Finkelstein.
Yeah, deadass. Honestly, dude, something like that, because Norm Finkelstein's not afraid to debate fucking anybody, dude. He doesn't care how disgusting, how low, how pathetic you are. He'll sit there and he'll fucking argue with you, and he'll tell you exactly how disgusting and how pathetic and how low you are. That's actually, if Kyle and Crystal want to do a community service for the whole world, let Norm Finkelstein just absolutely rip Nick Fuentes to shreds.
Yeah, that would be a fascinating pairing, because obviously Norm Finkelstein has very controversially said, including on this show, that Holocaust deniers sometimes make some good points.
Oh,
Remember
God.
he said
Yeah,
that?
that was...
But what he meant was basically the same thing I said, which is they'll say things that you don't really know how to respond to if you're not 100% equipped to do that job. Obviously, he loves to phrase things in very provocative ways, which then makes it kind of ironic that he turns around and wags his finger at Palestinian protesters for saying from the river to the sea. I thought that was kind of weird. But
that was weird. He also has made some problematic statements about gender, but it's true that this is a guy whose parents, I believe, were literally in fucking Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, nobody is more familiar and more intimately, exposed to the horrors of the Holocaust that's living today than Norm Finkelstein, right? And he's also an expert on Palestine. He would be the perfect guy to debate Nick Fuentes, because none of the horse shit that Nick would throw his way about, like, oh, I've been talking about Israel since, 2015. And Norm Finkelstein would just laugh in his fucking face and say, you little twerp. Do you think I give a single fuck that you've been talking about that since 2015? I've been talking about this since 1962 or whatever the fuck. You know what I mean? And I've been doing it louder and more flagrantly than you. And I've been doing it in places where it was more dangerous than you.
Honestly, it would be fun to, if we ever had the opportunity to interview Norm Finkelstein again, to ask him about this exact thing. How would you approach a conversation with someone like Nick Fuentes? Because I really do think when someone is that far down the fascist rabbit hole, you do run into the question of, like, okay, is it even worth having this conversation?
For sure.
Is it even, it's kind of like the thing about, like, is it worth platforming a climate change denialist next to a real scientist and acting like both these perspectives are, equally valid? Let's entertain a debate. Let's see who wins. Are black people dumber than white people? Let's hash it out. Like, that just, it feels gross.
I totally agree with you. And I think that it can get really carried away. However, one thing that I thought was, again, I would almost never give Ezra Klein credit on this podcast in my entire life. You guys know exactly how I feel about Ezra Klein. He had one really good moment in his career that I will always give him credit for, and that's when he debated Sam Harris. And Sam Harris was leading a really dangerous charge with a bunch of other disgusting assholes in the intellectual dark web, where they were trying to revive race realism, right? And basically all the shit that now Nick Fuentes says all the time, right? Which is, look at European white people, they're the smartest, and Asians are the other smartest, and, like, just a bunch of, like, stupid horse shit, right? But Sam Harris was getting really into it, like the bell curve. You remember when all of that was going on. And Ezra Klein had him on the Ezra Klein podcast and debated him into a fucking oblivion, right? Debated him into the fucking moon. And Ezra's a sharp guy. He's very well read. He did not get his, temperature raised very high, but he would even talk about it. He was like, bro, this is an insane thing to say. He was like, I am a white presenting individual. He was like, but my heritage is Jewish, right? And he was talking about how it would be absolutely insane for him to ever go along with some sort of, like, racial supremacy kind of ideology, which, given his, problematic support for Israel, you can't fucking, but in the context of this debate, right, he did an absolute fucking tremendous job just putting a bow on why Sam Harris's argument was so selective, so foolish, so disingenuous. And then he turns it around on Sam Harris and he's like, look, dude, if you're a real scientist and a real doctor and somebody who believes in this, methodology, look at how all of these things are just totally out of whack and something that, you would never actually be able to hold up to like the rigorous scrutiny.
Yeah, obvious bullshit.
And it fell apart and it humiliated the guy. And it was a big part of the downfall of Sam Harris. So I do think sometimes, like Sam Harris, bad guy, but not Nick Fuentes, bad guy, right? So I agree with you. There's a scale and there's a point, but there are times where somebody with even like the most like ludicrous, poisonous ideology can just be exposed as a total loser and fraud by an expert. And, it is compelling for people.
Yeah. I think it could be done. I'm glad I'm not in Crystal and Kyle's position though, because they probably do feel some level of responsibility. Like, oh shit, maybe we really do have an opportunity here, to get some of his followers to see the truth, and maybe some of the groypers will listen to this and they'll realize that this guy's a fraud and an idiot and a total bastard. But again, it's a real gamble.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there. Be there. The Vanguard will be there.